I don't want to say anything wrong during this video, so let's have a measure.
Okay, here is the result. On the outside, we have 48 inches, and towards the inside, we have 47 inches.
So this is officially a 47-inch snowblower. In today's video, I'm going to be taking this snowblower apart, and hopefully I can lay out all the parts so I can give you guys a good overview. I will also take apart the drive mechanism, and I'll also have a good look at the mounting hardware.
Over here on this table, I have the main shaft, which will then hook up to our PTO and also to this shaft, which is on our mounting hardware. Once it's on the mounting hardware, it will then transfer power through this little drive shaft onto that snowblower right there. But I will have a good look at all of this right here, and I will be removing everything so you guys have a better understanding of what's involved.
I purchased this snowblower right here a couple weeks ago, and it's been sitting outside. Now I can finally work on it because I will need this in winter time to clear a bunch of snow. This right here was the final auction price. I purchased it online, and I have to say I got a pretty good deal because I've never seen a deal like this anywhere else. Especially in some Facebook groups, all these snowblowers go for much more money, especially the mounting hardware is super expensive and you can't always find it. So I think I got a really good deal, and if you think I got a good deal, let me know down in the comments section. So I just gave you information on the 47-inch snowblower. Now I can grab my tools and get to work. I will be stripping everything into bits and pieces. Later on in this video, everything will be laid out, and stay tuned for that if you're interested in single components. But right now I'll share with you guys B-roll, and if I stumble upon anything that's really tricky to take apart, I'll explain it in this video. So I'm about halfway through on the disassembly process of this 47-inch snowblower. As you'll notice, the auger is still in place, as well as the drive shaft, which goes to the back gearbox. I removed everything on the back end, on the top, like the chute, and I have everything laid out on the ground. But now I'm gonna focus on this side, and then the last thing I will have to remove is the gearbox on the other side.
I removed 3 bolts off to the left and 3 bolts off to the right. The bolts will hold the eccentric bearing to the shaft and the eccentric bearing flange to the housing of the snowblower. There's also a little spacer plate in between. I just left one bolt on the top just for safety reasons, but I think the best thing to do right now is to remove the whole auger and just pull it out this way up front. And to do that, I will have to remove two more bolts. They're right here, and the nuts are underneath. You'll notice them right there. And I think if I remove those two nuts on the top, I can actually take out the shaft, which is splined right there, from that U-joint or the yoke of the U-joint. So I think if I just remove those two bolts, I should be able to pull this whole auger out of the spline right there. So I'll give that a try and I'll see how it goes. As I mentioned before, I'd like to take that spline out of the yoke, but I think it's seized in there, so I'm gonna have to do something else. I actually flipped the snowblower around, so it's a little bit easier to see. I also have this piece of wood right here. I tried lifting it up with this, but that spline just does not want to come out. So I'll give you guys a close-up view on what I'm looking at. I flipped the snowblower around, and I actually have this long piece of 2x4 right here because I thought if I lift it up just like this, with a little bit of leverage underneath that gearbox right there, it would actually come out of the spline. But there's a lot of play actually in that other auger down there. So I think what I'm gonna do is remove those three bolts around that auger, place that auger in a way that it comes out of that little cutout, and it'll actually pop off or out of the snowblower. As you guys saw, I wasn't able to remove it on the spline, but I did take all auger pieces out at once with help by that longer piece of 2x4. I just actually rested it up against this cutting edge, and that worked super good. I just had to apply a little bit of pressure and that popped right out. Right now, the snowblower housing only has the gearbox on the bottom side, and the shaft with the key is sticking out on this side. So I'll give you guys a close-up view on this. I also see a little bit of damage which has been fixed in the past. And the auger assembly itself needs to still be disassembled, so I'll have a good look at this and share with you guys how to disassemble everything. So right here I have the housing, and you'll notice there's a bunch of wear and tear, but it's actually not that bad. So when we look at the cutting edge can be flipped around, and the other side is actually still in great condition. So what that means is I can actually take these bolts out of the cutting edge and actually just flip the cutting edge around, because this side of the cutting edge is worn and the other side is still brand new. So I'm gonna flip that around eventually, and obviously I'm gonna be cleaning this all up and giving it a new paint job, so I can do that at the very end. Over here you will notice the shaft from the gearbox. The gearbox is right underneath of the snowblower right now, but I will remove it with those 4 bolts on the other side. Now when we have a good look at the inside, you'll notice it has already been patched up. So right here we have some plates that have been welded in, and I'm actually pretty happy with that because I don't have to do it myself. You'll notice down below the original plate has been banged up, and it was probably actually thinner than what they put in right there. So I'm actually really glad they did, but I might just touch it up a little bit. And over here, hope you guys can see that it's bubbling up and there's a little bit of wear right here. So I'm gonna have to tap this back down, clean everything out, and maybe I'm gonna run a weld down underneath so this plate doesn't come up anymore. Other than that, the whole housing looks very good. But over here on the auger, we're gonna still have to do some disassembling. This is basically the same setup, just like on the rototiller. So we have a spacer on the end, we have an eccentric bearing, we have the 2 flange housings, we have an eccentric collar which holds everything in place. Right here we have 2 pieces. We also have down below a safety pin or a shear bolt, and this pin right here goes through the main shaft, which then goes to the gearbox, and that right there is actually our drive pin. So this whole half is driven off that pin off to the far right, and we have the exact same setup on the left side. And just to make everything nice and safe, we also have a shear pin on this side as well. Now looking at these two halves, they're still in great condition. I might just do a little bit of touch up here and there because as you'll see, there's a little bit of wear and tear. Obviously this is not a new auger. I'm going to be tearing into the gearbox. It does look like it's leaking. We have a little bit of oil right there and right there. And then the main issue, or whatever I was looking at before, is over here. I had an issue with this spline. I actually wanted to remove the spline from the yoke, but it didn't come out. So I do not see a set screw anywhere or any bolt that would hold this in place. So I think it's seized right here, but I'll have to take a closer look. It might even be welded from the inside, but that doesn't seem very likely. But we'll have a good look at all this in a couple minutes. I'm going to take off that gearbox first and push all these parts aside.
The snowblower housing is out of the way, and now I can focus on the auger assembly. The right side and the left side are identical, and it won't be very hard to take this all apart. Sides of the auger assembly have been removed, and I'll share with you guys a close-up view what I have here on the ground.
So over here on the gearbox, you will notice there are exactly 3 shafts coming out. The gearbox will transmit power through this shaft into the gearbox, and it will go out onto both auger shafts. Now this gearbox, as you will notice, is leaking on all 3 seals. So we have a seal on each shaft. These 2 seals are both leaking, and then this one right here also happens to be leaking, but it's also crooked, if you can see that. This side is flush with the housing, and then this side is really deep in there, and that's obviously not good for the seal because right here there's a gap. That's where it's leaking from, and then on this side it's actually digging into the shaft itself. So I'm gonna have to replace all 3 seals, and I'm gonna open this up to see how good the gears are as well, and then I'm gonna have to probably lube this up once again. Now over here on this shaft, as I mentioned before, this spline does not want to come out of the yoke, and on this side of the shaft there's nothing holding it, or it's not even welded to the yoke, so I should actually be able to remove this yoke up and off. This snap ring has been removed. The snap ring would actually sit right in that groove, and the best way to remove this will be probably to heat it up, but I'll have to do that off camera because I probably don't have enough time today to do that. Now over here on this part, as you will see, this actually is the 2-stage part of the snowblower. This will actually throw the snow up and out of the snowblower chute, and you will notice there's a bunch of wear on this part right here. This has been bent back, but it's also heavily worn. So I'm gonna have to see if I can maybe somehow replace these or even add a plate in front of it, and especially even on the bend right here, I'm gonna have to clean this all up because I do not want any sharp edges like that are worn just to be hanging off of the existing metal. Even on the back, you'll notice there are some marks where it was rubbing against some of the bolts because this shaft or this yoke actually didn't go onto the shaft properly. So it was actually rubbing on the back side as well. So that's obviously not good. So on this plate right here, I'm going to have to do quite a bit of work. And if I do a little bit of work on this, I will share an update.
At the beginning of this video, I did mention I'll have a look at the mounting hardware, which is closer to the front of the tractor on the John Deere 55 or at least the 55 series tractors. This mounting hardware should actually fit the 655, 755, 855, and even 955. I do not think on the width there's anything different, just on the length of the tractor. So I'll give you guys a close-up view on what I have right here, and then we'll also have a good look at the shaft which connects the rear PTO to the Snowblower PTO shaft. On this table I have the mounting hardware for the front of the John Deere 55. You will notice this hardware also has a quick attach system, so all you have to do is basically pull this pin, hook it up into these two grooves right here, and these pins will drop into the frame itself. Once this is hooked up to the tractor, you can then go ahead and add your front cylinder, which is mounted in this point. You'll have to add a pin, and there will be a cylinder which is about this long on the front of this hardware. That will allow the snowblower to be lifted and lowered to your desired height. Now over here, we also have a shaft. This will extend our PTO shaft. You will notice it has a spline on both sides, off to the right and off to the left. Holding this shaft, we also have a bearing, which is a single row radial bearing, which is on the front, and also another one in the back. Now in today's video, I really want to take this apart because I might have to replace these two bearings right here. If I replace these two bearings, that will be much easier on the tractor, and we know we have brand new bearings, so there will not be an issue here within this shaft. This assembly has been completely dismantled. As you will notice, the shaft has a spline on both sides. We also have two bearing fits on either side. This shaft is in great condition and I'll be able to clean it up. We have three very long bolts, and we also have a couple of nuts which will go along with these bolts. This right here is just the housing, and this will hold everything together. We also have these openings so we can get to the eccentric collars for the eccentric bearings. So when we look at these bearings, these are basically the same bearings I had on the rototiller. They are eccentric. The center of the bearing is out of center, so you'll notice there's a little bit more material right here and a little bit less right here. So now when we grab our collar, what will happen is it will go on this way, and then we can turn this collar 90 degrees and it will lock up on our main shaft. So with this explained, I will have to get two brand new bearings, and these bearings are also held in place by these two halves right here. This one is damaged right now, but I'm going to have to bring it back because I think these are a little bit special because they only have 3 bolt holes. Most of the other ones that are very popular, I suppose,
have actually 4 bolt holes. So these are kind of special because they only have 3. So I'm going to be reusing these for sure.
All those parts for the mounting hardware will be cleaned up and they will be prepared for an upcoming rebuild video. If you guys are interested in that, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't already. And if you guys are enjoying this video, tap that like button down below as well. It really helps me out. And if you guys have any questions, don't forget to leave a comment down below as well. Since I removed a bunch of parts in today's video, I'll go ahead and share with you guys all the parts right here on the ground, and I'll discuss everything and share with you guys what I have to do for the upcoming rebuild video.
Over here on the shop floor, I have a bunch of miscellaneous parts that came off of this assembly. Over there, we have the snowblower housing. I will be cleaning everything up, and I will be touching it up with a welder, especially around that middle area. I will be stripping all the paint, and I will be priming it and painting it before the next video, which is the rebuild video. Same over here with the chute mechanism. I will also be stripping all the paint, removing all the rust, priming, and prepping it for paint. Over here on the ground, I have these snowdrift blades. This will actually sit up on the housing of the snowblower itself, and they will stick up right up in the air, and this will cut through snowdrifts, and it does help a bunch, but I'll see if it really does work because I've never used a snowblower myself. Down below, all the rest of the parts are basically black. So everything from here on down will all be painted black. We have the mounting hardware, which will hook up directly to our quick attach. Over here, we have another bracket, which will hold one of our cylinders. Both augers will be straightened up, they will be cleaned up, and they will be painted as well. This gearbox will be taken apart, and all the hardware around the gearbox, I will have to check the gearbox itself. And in the rebuild video, you'll see this apart, and we'll go through the assembly process. Over here, I have 2 cylinders, and I'm just going to double check on the John Deere 55 if they both work and that they do not leak. So I can actually do that now on the tractor. Just start it up, plug these 2 hydraulic fittings in there, activate the valve, and see if this moves out and in smoothly. Over here on this table, I have the extending drive shaft, which will go from the transmission housing all the way to the mounting hardware, which is that area right there. This will have to be cleaned up. I will remove both ends. I will check both yokes and the bearings, and I'm going to reuse it. Same as this drive shaft down below. This goes from the mounting hardware to the snowblower. So this is a very short drive shaft that will also be checked because also here, the previous owner, whoever owned this, also had this hose clamp right here behind this quick attach. So this might not be working, so I'm going to have to check that. Same with those 2 pins and some of the auger plates. These plates do drive the auger, so I'm going to have to check those. On my smaller table off to the window, I have a bunch of little parts. All these bolts will be cleaned up. I hope I can reuse them because they seem to be in good condition. Maybe some of them, which are super rusty, I'd have to replace, but that's not a big deal. These bigger bolts I want to reuse because these are probably really expensive. And like I mentioned over here, I will be replacing 2 of these bearings. So I got a lot of work on my hands. I have to clean up all these parts. I have to get rid of the rust. I have to prime and paint everything. And once I have everything painted and all the new parts back in the shop, I will bring you guys back for a rebuild video. I'm gonna be really happy if this all goes together without any big issues, because then I will have a functioning snowblower, which will go onto the John Deere 55, and I can use that in the wintertime.